everyone. I hope everyone had a wonderful week. I'm just making sure everything is lined up perfectly. So, okay, let's start this off. So, the first story I have for you is going to make a few of you upset, but let me very very carefully when I lean into this, understand that this isn't typically how I start off an evening. If you haven't joined me before, I'm Karina and this is This Week in Politics. My first story is going to upset a few people. So keep your hats on. Things are about to get really rough. Um, Alright, that's enough of the intro. Let's get started because there's very limited time. So I don't know how many of you catch that I do post most of my stories before this live, but I didn't get to do this one. This one sort of fell on my lap, and if you remember, the Fixated Persons Unit went after Friendly Geordies. They raided the union heads, and they've done a lot of dodgy things of recent that I'm unhappy with. But this one really bothered me because this isn't just controversial, it's ridiculous. Even if you had the best case manager in the world, this is such a ridiculous claim that I can't keep a straight face at even putting it out there as some credible threat. This is now the third iteration for an excuse that I've heard for these raids happening. The first one was they were investigating possible threats. The next one came up with they were really seeking out how much possible problems would be caused at these events. And this is the third iteration that they've landed on. Now, I'm not saying that real threats don't happen. I'm saying this particular group is not one of them. I'm hard pressed to even understand why they went with this as a story. New South Wales Police defended their raid on a group of climate protesters. Yeah, people, you hear that ridiculous part right. They went after nothing short of climate protesters because, in the average world of, wow, that's ridiculous, this is what they've come up with. I normally don't do this to you guys. I normally don't come in hot. But this is one of those stories when you look at it, you go, really? This is what you're going to go with? I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. Okay. Just checking. Okay, so they were planning extreme forms of protest and acted aggressively towards officers. Really? That's the story you want to lean into, Mr. Officer. Look, whoever wrote this report is poor at best and at worst a downright liar. There is no indication that any climate protesters were ever going to be a risk to any national security or even police. The very fact that they put this out there as any thought of ever a risk to police is terrible at best. At worst, it's disgraceful. Sunday morning, police deployed a significant number to the property at Colo in Sydney's northwest after a confrontation with Blockade Australia, a group that could have caused blockades at Port Botany, the city's major port, in March. Police say they were investigating the group as it prepared and planned for more protest activity on Sunday. When the protesters acted aggressively, investigating officers in Armagh either slashed or let down the tyres of the vehicle. How do you justify slashing and letting the tyres down of people's vehicles? Look, even in the best moment for New South Wales, this is like the worst criminal thing I've heard. These police in New South Wales need to wake up and stop playing to the conservative ideology that they're playing with. You can take your fixated persons unit and whatever it is that you think that you're getting from this and stick it where the sun doesn't shine. Because I swear to God, this was negligence. At best, you couldn't even come up with, a real threat here. Where you justified slashing people's tires and letting out the air so they couldn't get home, and then you went on to raid their homes. We're talking about climate protesters here, people, not just the standard. Protesters should never be targeted anyway. It's repugnant. That prompted more comprehensive police response, according to the acting Assistant Commissioner Paul Dunstan. Now, remember, Mick Fuller was there before that. He's the one that opted to go with the fixated persons unit on Friendly Geordies. Now, normally I don't do this kind of thing, but when police make asses out of themselves, you can't help but be angry at the behaviour that they're displaying. Now, those police that were attacked by the group in the morning feared for their lives. They called for urgent assistance and police from the Sydney metropolitan area. Notice how they do not show any footage of that incident. Since people were so out of control at this incident, you show me where climate protesters needed their tyres slashed, homes raided, and air let out of their tyres. Come on, New South Wales, you're better than this. You need to be done with that level of corruption. Police should not be political like that. However, which way you run this is bad. You attacked protesters, climate protesters, people that would never, ever do anything like this. Why would you raid their homes? On what intelligence do you wish to share at which point that they were this big national security threat to you? Nah, come on. They're pissing in my pocket and they know it. After the fixated persons unit went to Friendly Geordie's home, they already had crossed the line. This is beyond that. Raiding union members' homes was already too far. They've overstepped their bounds, and I expect New South Wales Police to do an full investigation of this. I don't know what it would come out with, but I fully expect it. There were no injuries to police. Really? You make a claim that it was so violent, but there are no injuries to police. Which story do you want to stick with first? Because let me tell you the story I want to tell, not one that covers your behinds. Notice how there's not one video that attaches to that. It's utterly repugnant. The Blockade Australia protesters described the police's action on Sunday as insane and an overreach and a large-scale raid. Okay, so police were raiding our beautiful Kim, and cops, groups of cops in camo, set in context with gear guns and surrounded the camp in the morning. I mean, they used dog squad riot police, helicopters, fully militarized police over. We're talking climate change protesters. There isn't a good excuse for this. Heads need to roll for this kind of thing. I don't know which part of the country where anyone's going to find this shit show that I'm seeing here. Okay, but I don't. This is beyond the pale. The amount that they covered up for Gladys Berejiklian and her little crapola little show, you're done. You're done. How many times do you have to do this where you had John Barilaro and his little group of thuggians using the police like this? This is how our system is based on climate destruction, responds to a movement, non-violent climate defenders. Activist Zelda Grimshaw told the Sydney Morning Herald. This morning, this level of police repression of climate movement is unprecedented. We are now suffering multiple impacts of Australia's continued climate destruction with unprecedented fires, floods, and repression. Now, how hard is it to not get to the bottom of what happened here? These people need justice. There's nothing short of insanity that they even pulled off a stunt like that. Now, one would think that if you were even remotely interested in having a fair and ready justice system, it wouldn't involve this. Never should have. When I seen this, I thought, oh, that's not great. But then I started reading and it got worse. Police deployed nearby police area commands from specialist resources, including Pol Air police dogs. They put police dogs on climate non-violent protesters. Police dogs. Yeah, I'm sure that's how the legislation was written. Non-violent protesters should be able to be eaten by dogs. And no, they're not gentle with people. What an abuse of the dogs too. It's utterly repugnant. 2 people have been arrested and 1 more arrest planned. Police say officers are still conducting search warrants on properties. Search warrants. That's what you need to do to climate protesters, Mr. Officer. Dude, you've gone so far out of your realm of policing. I don't want to tell you how political this looks. This is the most political raid I've ever seen, and that goes for the union raid and the fixated persons unit. Police established a strike force named Strike Force Guard. These are climate change activists, right? They had there's a thing called Strike Force Task against climate change protesters, and this has not made a headline the way that it should. Why would that exist? Exactly. I mean, surely big bad police officers with all that weaponry on them could deal with a few protesters, couldn't they? If not, we need to check out their type of training. If standard police officers cannot deal with a climate change group of protesters. Okay, with no police hurt. Keep that in mind as they're justifying the raiding of these people's homes. Police dogs are squad unit. Oh, and just for funsies, now they're just going all out to make sure that they stop any climate change protesting in New South Wales, because this is exactly what we stopped in Queensland. Here in Queensland, we got rid of government like that. The Newman government had this really crazy approach about protesting, and they were really hyper vigilant on it, and they had this thing about group gathering and all this kind of thing. They were thrown out for doing less than this. Dunstan was asked specifically, police were investigating on Sunday prior to the confrontation. He alleges activists were practicing and rehearsing constructing items that are similar methods of protest they conducted during the March protests, where you saw elaborate objects being formed in the middle of the roadway, ultimately disrupt vehicle activity and trains around the Sydney area. Okay, so how do you justify all of this? You can't. So for anyone out there that sees this, I need you to share that. Whatever you think this is going to be, this can't be it. Most people, when they tell you something bad happens during the day, they're not emotional. This one makes me quite emotional. Our climate crisis is real. And I've attended climate rallies with no less than my children. I've taken them to these things. This is not a game. We are not mucking around with this. I don't know where they got the idea that this was the brightest idea that they've had, but let me tell you, it was not bright. Now, just to lighten up. Okay. So Tim Wilson is having a difficult time. And there is this massive sympathy going out to Tim. So someone decided to do a case study, if you will, on what happens to MPs once they lose their job. It's a bit of an interesting overlook. That's not the part I wanted to look at. This is the part that I wanted to look at. The experience of MPs who lost their seats often is shattering. Former Liberal MP Tim Wilson said that he was in the fetal position crying morning after the May 21 poll. That part's important because I didn't think he cared about the climate change issues, the people caught up in the floods, the fires, and everything else. He didn't seem to care that he was attacking welfare recipients or refugees or anyone that was below the poverty line. And he wants sympathy and was worried about crying in a fetal position when he lost a job which was not guaranteed to him. That's how election cycles work. Buddy, I'm gathering that you can be handed any number of lobbyist jobs from this moment on. I don't think I'm going to be too sympathetic to a cause that allows you to keep that particular job. It's repugnant that people like Chris Pine resigned and then instantly gets handed a job for a deal that he did up, or that Gladys Berejiklian is now into banking, or that Mike Baird did the same thing, or several other politicians do this kind of grubby stuff where they get jobs that they are neither qualified for or should be put into the position of. It's repugnant, and I don't think that anyone should be hiring them. Most of them have law degrees. They should go back to practicing law or something. Actually do what they're qualified to do. This is not it. And I don't have sympathy for these people. Many of them have other jobs. Some of them were selling furniture. Looking at you, Craig Kelly. I mean, really, this is what you want to do? You want to spend your time crying that you lost an election after 9 years of nearly 10 torturing people? Really? And you want sympathy for that? Fair play, buddy. But I'm not up for it. So there's that. Now, on to my next one. So I have the minimum wage win. Now, I know all of you have probably gotten those details on the minimum wage win. But just in case for those who haven't, the minimum wage was lifted to $1.05 an hour, that from its $20.33 base from July 1, an increase of 5.2%. That is $21.38 an hour. Workers on an award rate go up 4.6%. A cut in real wages, minimum $40 weekly increase. Award rates below 869.60 per week. This is a win, and let me say, congratulations, Labor, you got it. You asked for this, and the Fair Work Commission took you seriously. I have to thank them for what they did. Okay. I think that that's an important story that I think highlights the benefits to having a left-leaning government. Sure, we can talk about the many other benefits, but this is one that they definitely said and delivered on. So I think that's a great win. So, hold on. Oh, I wasn't. There's a little bit more on that. And I wanted to show you what it was. Okay. Why do they use cafe owners for this? Why are Australia's views on things like wage rises and COVID constantly represented by a niche group known as cafe owners? When did our geographically vast and diverse nation decide that people who rent space, sell coffee, are the spokespeople for the litmus test of the nation? This is a really, really good question. Over 2.7 million Australians will be affected by this new wage rise. An automatic go to for comment on every media organisation in Australia is a cafe owner. Why? Is it laziness? Does the industry lobby group push and promote the narrative on media outlets? However, it was actually less than 5.5% increase. And the Australian Council Trade Union, the ACTU, has been pushing for it. But the industry insiders and owners slammed the decision, which will impact more than 2.7 million Australians on the national minimum award wages, claiming they cannot afford to pass on the rise, warning that the price could jump up as a result. One such countless small business owners impacted by that was a cafe owner in Five Dock. Australia Bureau of Stats data, where are all the other owner managers across Australia being asked in the media about the issues like wages and COVID? Who on earth voted for cafe owners to be the spokespeople for anything that happens in small business? In August 2016, 20% of business owners worked in the construction industry. Other prominent industries included professional, scientific, technical services, with 13% of businesses, owners, managers counted in the census. Healthcare, social service assistance, 8.1%. Other services, 7.8%, retail, trade, 7.0%, and agriculture, forestry, fishing. In contrast, business owner managers were less prevalent in electricity, gas, water, waste services. 0.4% of all owner managers, mining, 0.4% of public administrations, and safety, 0.7%. You would think, by judging by their heavy media presence and disproportionate representation, the ABC in particular is out of hand with its constant cafe owner narrative. It's just bizarre. Do they know the industry in all of Australia? There is a conga line of cafe and restaurant owners running Australia and setting all policies. Well, this looks very embarrassing. And a final comment on this week's award of minimum wage. The largest group of workers who will get the pay rise are in aged care, childcare, community disability support workers. This is the only rise that they will receive. They receive that and a lot more. And I think that's the point. Most retail hospital business owners are already paying more than the award minimum to attract and keep staff because of the labour shortages. This is to lift award wages and does not apply to them. You only have to pay it if you are paying minimum wage award wages. So that is interesting. So we got more on the ex-Lemmy stuffer. So we got, ex-Lemmy staff sacked fairly, the court rules. Jackie Lambie's decision to sack her former chief of staff. As he ridiculed and demanded the Tasmanian senator in a letter to the Prime Minister, was fair, the court has found. Now, this is super important. Jackie Lambie fired him fairly. I don't have to agree with everything Jackie does, but this is right. You can't have your chief of staff undermining you, writing to then Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and really saying things that were horrible, sexist, and just downright mean. Why would you work for someone if you didn't believe in them? Rob Messenger and his wife Fern worked for Miss Lambie in 2014 to 2017, managing the Senator's office in Burnie and in Canberra. They were sacked in 2017 for serious misconduct, and they sent a letter to the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, as well, and the alleged inappropriate workplace behaviour. That's part of the issue, is that they behave this way and then they think, I should be able to keep my job. No, you don't get to undermine your boss. I don't care which job you enter. You don't get to undermine your boss and then go, no, they get to keep their job for doing so. That's not how any of that works. It's ridiculous, the amount of ridiculousness that goes into that. Okay. So next, I want to talk about the energy crisis. Okay. So, if this is any indication of why we are experiencing really ridiculous energy bill prices, here's might be a good time to say this is why it all should be kept in government hands. See, when you do something stupid like privatise everything and turn it over to letting companies run things how they want to rather than for profit, than in national interest, things like energy seem to go a little bit haywire and could cause a thing called rolling blackouts. Yes, that's right. You're hearing here that they were threatening the East Coast with rolling blackouts. Why? Because energy providers were allowed to sell their energy to overseas, and rather than keeping enough here, they got away with it. Because under Conservatives, it doesn't matter what you keep, it just matters if that business entity can rip off as many people as possible. And you have been suckered in to the whole system. Okay. Angry about the sudden astronomical rise in your energy cost of Australian gas? You should be. Not only is it hitting the household budgets directly and escalating costs to local businesses, it is also a major contributing factor in recent spike in electricity prices. Ordinarily, there'd be some consolation in knowing our hard-earned cash was going to a good home, where at least it was being used to build a future for the next generation. It is quite possible that is the case, but unfortunately, that home is not here. Most windfalls for profits are being earned at the moment, courtesy of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and are being funneled out by the countries because Australia's oil and gas resources are overwhelmingly exploited by global multinationals. That part's important. Rather than forcing companies to keep enough here to keep our country rolled around, they're being allowed to just take it away, charge us more for whatever's left over in the scraps. That part really does mean something. So this is really important. I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is why you don't sell it. For any reason. You don't let companies like this exploit people. The right to food, shelter, and a decent power source should be the right of every Australian. It should be the right of everyone all over the world. Why are we letting multinationals control a major resource like that? Is there a good reason that that's privatised? Is there ever a good reason to allow most of our gas to overseas companies while multinationals are making all the money, but we get told, hey, there could be possible, gas shortages, and we could also risk electricity shortages. Seems unfair to me. I don't know about you. In fact, there's barely any local quality involved. According to a new study by the Australian Institute, Australians have just 4.3% ownership in the companies extracting and processing natural gas across the country, from northwest shelf across the inland Bass Strait, North Queensland. Now that's huge. None of these companies should have been able to be out of government hands. I don't understand how we're going to be left shivering through the winter because we can't turn on our heaters, but these multinationals get to get away with this. My God, it's repugnant. I don't even understand how we got to the point where this was acceptable. Given that the vast amount of capital required to extract the process and export the oil and gas, it expects the major energy multinationals to be the forefront of the developing of the massive projects. Now, here's my problem with that as well, that they dig and extract this stuff and barely pay royalties for it. That is also a concern that I have, which is why we need to diversify and make climate change policy our number one hit. Why? Because we need to make sure that everyone has a working water tank at their home and solar power. Why? So this can't happen. If you're going to let crazy multinationals do this kind of thing, then, hey, here's a great idea. How about you let the people get their own power? It's mostly renters get caught in this trap as well because they don't get a say in where their water comes from or their power. So they're left to suck it up and pay whatever it is these companies want to charge you. If you're in a home that is barely insulated and you're a renter and you need that heat on to keep your family going, how is that in any way fair? Homeowners too are left with a ridiculous price to pay. But I really want to focus in on people who do not get a choice about how their energy is distributed to them. For instance, if you are a renter and you have a gas line, you have to stick with that gas line. You can't say midway, hey, how about you make it all electric? Or how about you just stick some solar panels on? Because that's not how it works in the renting market. And if you say to me, oh, why don't you just find a house that has that? Have you seen the rental market? See, this is why you can't have stuff like this. We can't have nice things while you privatize it off. It's not fair, it's not equitable, and it's not how Australia should run, in my opinion. The tragedy, however, is that there is only minimal Australian ownership involved, which means a lot of the dividends flow offshore, but that's most of the corporations that pay no tax. So they're paying no tax and they're extracting all of this stuff and barely paying any royalties. They're not even paying any tax of it. And they're willing to let you freeze to do it. This needs to be at a national cabinet level where all of these things are acquired by government, for government, forever held in government hands. No ifs or buts about it. If you're going to force a certain amount of the population that do not get a say in how this is distributed to them, you have to make sure they are not exploited in your crazy processes, i.e. this way. Because whilst you do this and you make power more expensive, food becomes more expensive and everything else in the middle of it. So you are in a very effective way, making everything harder for people who cannot find another way around. That is something I cannot understand, stands to reason in this country. If you can, I don't know, give me a reason that exists, I'm listening. My inbox is always open to suggestion on a better way to make that possible. But, stuff happens and this is what we're going to be left with. Hopefully Albo can fix up some of the wrinkles in this, but we will see how that pans out. Okay, next one. So, did you know that the crazy lady won? So, I shared this with you guys earlier, and I was hoping it. One Nation Pauline Hanson wins Queensland Senate seat. Amanda Stoker out. Pauline Hanson has retained her Senate seat for another term, with the Australian Electoral Commission officially declaring that she finished fifth in Queensland's upper house race. Labor's Anthony Chisholm was expected to finish fifth, but was leapfrogged by Hanson, putting him in the sixth and final spot. It means the Liberal National Party, Amanda Stoker, has lost her seat. The 68-year-old senator has been elected for the sixth-year term after entering the Senate as One Nation candidate in 2016. Senator Stoker exits after being placed in the Senate by the LNP in 2018 when George Brandis resigned. Miss Hanson, who has previously represented the lower house seat of Oxley, west of Brisbane, garnered 191,056 first preference votes. Now, if you're thinking about how this happened, you have to go back to they have this areas in every state. They have this one area that's gonna vote for these type of people. Like, for instance, the seat of Cook for Scott Morrison. How he won that after how repugnant he was, I don't know. The seat of Barnaby Joyce, I don't know how he's ever won that, ever. There are just some seats that you can't look at and be objective to and go, oh, that's actually easy to get rid of them. That's why what the Teals did was so amazing. They got blue ribbon seats, fair and square, hands down. In the lower house, let me tell you about one seat that the Greens even got from the LNP. That's how much they were disliked. Do you know how bad you got to be where you got to be like, nah, we're going a whole nother way? I think that the Liberals were really punished in this election, and damn, they should have been. They made such an awful, awful mess of it. So, as One Nation polled just over half the amount required for a quota in Queensland, Ms Stoker, losing her seat in Queensland's traditional Senate split of the right and the left, senators had been restored. The Brisbane solicitor worked in a corporate law before she joined the Senate in 2018, where she became a vocal supporter of the government's religious discrimination bill. You know, remember the Bigot Bill thing? You know, that awful thing that I kept saying, hey, yeah, don't do that. That's her. Her and Miss Steves were like, hey, you know, we should just be terrible to gay people because they don't actually have a good reason for doing any of those things. Just FYI, they just want to say that the Bible says something that it totally doesn't say. And I would be hard-pressed to find a section that actually says, hey, yeah, we should have the right to be terrible to people that are same-sex attracted people. Excuse me? I don't know where they get off being like that. If you're so religious and righteous in yourself, you don't need to be horrible to anyone. But here we are, it's 2022, and we have this religious zealot living in these cronies of the LNP. But if you think that they're done playing with this little tool, let me tell you, this was so unpopular that they pushed it through 3 times. They're not done with this. They do have this ability to spin stuff like this into some sort of crusading war for them, but I doubt it's going to get any traction. Mother of 3, served as 10 years, as Assistant Minister for Women, Industrial Relations and Attorney General while in office. Oh yeah, because Christian Porter had his little issue. If you're wondering what that little issue is, read the Rachel Baxdale issue. If you want to go through my past lives, look it up. And he has a women issue, big one. So that happened. So I want to talk about this little one. What were the bombs left to go off by government that cannot be stopped as soon as I would like? So, hold on, I've got to find it. Okay, here we go. I am going to show you this, and yeah.
The system as it currently stands means that under the mutual obligations process for receiving unemployment benefits is you have to show that you're looking for work. And the way they judge that is by making job seekers apply for up to 20 jobs a month. Now, this has long been criticised both by employers and job seekers saying it means that they just have to throw out applications in a scattered way that isn't necessarily the most effective in helping them find a job. And a lot of employers say they end up getting junk applications because people are only applying even though it's not suitable for them, just so they can say they've applied for a job. So the coalition, the previous government had designed a new system that would be points-based, with the idea that instead of having just a flat 20 jobs you need to apply for, you'd get different points for applying for some jobs, for going to interviews, those sorts of things. But the incoming Labor government has a number of concerns that the approach under this points-based system will be too punitive. So they're really not satisfied with this change in approach.
So given those concerns, what is the federal government intending to do about it?
Well, look, the new Employment Minister, Tony Burke, has said that it's too late to change or to stop the change coming into force, really. He's saying that the points-based system, it could have some merit if it's fixed. So he's indicated that the Labor government is looking at making some adjustments. For example, he says he wants to give more weighting for people who are undertaking training. If you're going for your driver's licence or a forklift licence, that should get more points under this system, to acknowledge the fact that most people who are unemployed at the moment are long-term unemployed. We have record low unemployment rates, around at 3.9%. So it's one where those who are unemployed in many cases are long-term unemployed, and improving their skills and training would be one of the most beneficial things they can do in order to get a job. So Tony Burke has made it clear that they're not going to have a wholesale scrapping of this points process, but instead intending to change it to improve it.
Okay, I think that clearly outlines that there will be these bombs that the LNP left there. And I think that because you can't scrap it whole hog, I think it's been pieced out there that, hey, we need to just try and fix some of these issues. But I think that can work. Maybe. We'll have to see what the ALP government does. But that's not to say that anything that the LNP left is workable. ALP will use it until it cannot. And when they can dismantle it and come up with a better system, which I dare say won't take them long. But the fact that those bombs were left there to go off, and they knew that was set to go off this way in this points-based system, so the long-term unemployed were left very much damaged longer. That was the end result to making these point systems really, really degrading and awful. And you got to think a lot of these job agencies too have made a lot of money out of some of these rorts that have been encompassed of the unemployed people's working conditions. Like trying to get a job has turned into a full-time job within itself. For instance, if you're unemployed, not only do you have to look for 20 different jobs, but you also have to get upskilled. Not only do you have to get upskilled, but then you have to be able to get money to be able to get, a new suit or buy, save up money for a TAFE course. That in itself becomes a full-time job. Do not be underneath the assumption that that's happening the way that it should. I just want to, it's all right, we're nearly at the end of our evening. Okay, so I have another story for you. Just let me quickly check is there something wrong with the sound? Because I'm not exactly sure. Why isn't it showing the way I need it to? Okay, and it's not. Okay, are you able to hear me? Like, is there any evidence that you can? Oh, damn. Like, there's no evidence that my sound is an issue, is there? Oh, my internet's not having fun with me. Just want to check that. Oh, so you can hear me, so that's not an issue. Okay, so here's where we are at. For the last couple of things for this evening. Okay, so here's what I heard. All premiers and territory leaders have officially defied Peter Dutton and his federal opposition by backing Albo and Labor on establishing a First Nations voice to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution. We are making some progress where there was a reverse happening for the last decade. But let's be honest, even with this, there is still a long way to go. Someday I hope that we'll have a First Nations PM. How will our First Nations people being given a chance to hear without having a voice to tell us what needs to be done? What have we been doing for the past 250 years? That is a very good point. So if it's true, and even the Liberal states have gone against Peter Dutton and said, hey, we're not going to listen to you and we're going to allow the First Nations voice to be heard, that is a win for the nation and our First Nations people that have been wanting to be recognised. So here's a story that I thought I would share with you. This is one of those stories that I thought, why would you be this ridiculous? So I got this and I thought, he's got to be kidding, right? There's got to be like a gag at the end of this where it's funny. Only I'm not laughing. He's not laughing. Probably not laughing. Erica Betts says ageism and sexism are behind Senate ticket demotion. No, how about you just a terrible, terrible senator that backed terrible, terrible things? How is that so weird for you to understand? Okay, veteran Tasmanian Liberal Senator Erica Betts has suggested he is a victim of ageism and sexism after being demoted to third place in a party Senate ticket. Yes, because that's why the very old-aged white male that is one of many in those places is complaining. If this wasn't a joke, my God, the ABC should have Charlie Pickering on this so quickly. I don't know when to begin laughing. And, you get to the point where you're a little bit like, that's about the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But wait, there's more. Okay. About 70 Liberal pre-selectors met on Saturday to determine the ticket's ranking, placing Assistant Minister for Forestry and Fisheries Jonathan Durnham as Senator and Senator Wendy Askew above Senator Betts, meaning it will be more difficult for him to retain his seat. Senator Abetz, 63, has been the top of the party's ticket since he was first elected in 1994, and damn it, the old white guy needed to keep that money rolling in. That to me seems like he didn't want to give up his little honey trap. And regardless of who would be more qualified for said position, the honey trap had to stay in place. Oh, and if you take it, we're now reversing all of the ideas that you would normally do to he's now claiming some sort of ageism thing. Tell me, what is the average age of people in these places? Because I can tell you, he would be on the average ranging age of these sorts of things. Just for funsies, how about we figure out why he would be so ridiculous in claiming something like this while we have a prime minister around similar age group? I mean, you would think that's an odd thing to do, right? But of course, don't let me stop you from pointing out the very obvious stupidity in this claim. On Tuesday, Conservative power broker gave his first interview since that ticket was announced to Hobart commercial radio station Triple M. The thing that encouraged me immensely was that there was no criticism of work ethic, energy capacity, advocacy skills, getting things done for Tasmania. What things did you get done for Tasmania, Mr. Eric Abetz? Because from what I've seen, you seem rather interested in a bigger bill and a few other terrible, terrible policies, helping Angus Taylor covering up for Jamleen. Oh, and just for fun, the old, how about we just not talk about the PM's numerous issues at the time. I mean, if you want to go down this road, Mr. Abetz, we're happy to, I don't know, hear what you actually did, but I can't find anything. One thing that they can't do about this day I was born, not the sex that I was given courtesy of the chromosome interaction, or whatever caused me to be made. What do you notice he cannot claim any achievements? No. He has to go straight to this without even a basis. It's so weird. They're weird people. People within the Tasmanian Liberal Party have been plotting at me since the late 2019. Senator Abetz is placed below Senator Junenham. Okay. So let's have a look at how old this guy is, just for my entertainment. Okay. Okay. So he's been in since, you can't see that. Okay. Let's have a look at what his part is. Okay. So he was elected in 2016. Okay. So, hold on. This doesn't have his age or anything. Let's go back and see what is actually about him. So, he was born in 1982. He's a little bit younger. Not by much. How old is Eric Abetz? Let's go with how old is Eric Abetz. So, someone about 25 years younger than him. But it's still a male that they want to replace him with. Really? This is what he wants to go with? I don't know. Just, it's creative at best. At worst, it's repugnant. Anyway, that brings everything to a insane close, and I want to thank everyone for coming out and viewing this for however long you could. I want to thank the people who keep supporting me during these now after election moments. I know that viewership always goes down once people have gotten into the mode of we have a new government and they're content with their government. But do keep in mind that accountability never ever stops. Until next week, I want to thank you all and I want you to have a wonderful night. Bye.